nikala jiva nikaya keta vishramsitan urubhaya sali mukan me adaya tatra vijahara ha vidan margan matsyo yuganta samye manu no palabdha shoni mayo nikala jiva nikaya keta Vishram Sitan Urubhaye Sali Mukanme Adhaya Tatra Vijayhara Ha Veda Margan Matsyo Yuganta Sam Aye Manu Yo Palabdaha Shoni Mayo Nikila Jiva Nikaya Keta Vishram Sitan Urubhaye Salile Mukane Me Adaya Tatra Vijahara Ha Veda Margan. Anyone else? This is quite a tongue twister. Any brave souls want to give it a try?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Matso juganto samaye manuno palabdha shani mayo nikhila jiva nikaye ketaha vishram sitam urubhaye salile mukham me adaya tatra bijahara hai habeda margan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Matsyo yuganto shamaye manu palabdha shoni mayo nikhila jivanika ekitaha vishram shitam uruvaye shalile mukhanme adaya tatra vijahara veda margan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Matsyo yuganta samaye manuno palabdha Shini mayo nikhila jiva nikaya keta Vishram bristam urubhaye salila mukhan me adaya tatra vijahara veda margan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Vatsayo yukanta samaye manuno palabdha shoni mayo nikhil jeev nikaya ketaha vishram shitan urubhaye salile mukhan me adaya tatra vijahara veda margan. Hare Krishna.
Very nice. Okay, word for words, synonyms. Matsya, incarnation of the fish. Yuga Anta, at the end of the millennium. Samaye, at the time of. Manu Na, the would-be Vaivashvata Manu. Upalabdha, seen. Shoni Maya, up to the earthly planets. Nikila, all. Jiva, living entities. Nikaya Keta, shelter for. Vishram Sitan, emanating from. Uru, great. Bhaye, out of fear. Salile, in the water. Mukat, from the mouth. Me, mine. Adaya, having taken to. Tatra, there. Vijahara, enjoyed. Ha, certainly. Veda Margan, all the Vedas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At the end of the millennium, the would-be Vaivashvata Manu of the name Satyavrata would see that the Lord in the fish incarnation is the shelter of all kinds of living entities, up to those in the earthly planets. Because of my fear of the vast water at the end of the millennium, the Vedas come out of my Brahma's mouth. And the Lord enjoys those vast waters and protects the Vedas. During one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus. And at the end of each Manu, there is devastation up to the earthly planets. And the vast water is fearful, even to Brahma. So in the beginning of the would-be Vaivashvata Manu, such devastation would be seen by him. There would be many other incidents also, such as the killing of the famous Sankashura. This foretelling is by the past experience of Brahmaji, who knew that in that fearful, devastating scene, the Vedas would come out of his mouth. But the Lord, in his fish incarnation, not only would save all living entities, namely the demigods, animals, men, and great sages, but would also save the Vedas. Om Jnana Timirhandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulan Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Before beginning, I would like to ask permission from the Vaishnavas in assembly and throughout the whole universe to bless me so that I can speak something in line with Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. Thank you for coming this morning. I'll read this verse one more time here. At the end of the millennium, the would-be Vaivashvata Manu of the name Satyavrata would see that the Lord in the fish incarnation is the shelter of all kinds of living entities, up to those in the earthly planets. Because of my fear of the vast water at the end of the millennium, the Vedas come out of my mouth, and the Lord enjoys those vast waters and protects the Vedas. So, here we have some very interesting descriptions and somewhat bewildering type of scenes and descriptions of the devastation at the end of the days of Brahma and the nights of Brahma. And actually, so what we're hearing here is about the incarnation of Krishna as the fish, as a fish. And actually, we have there's two pastimes that we can understand from the Srimad Bhagavatam that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, incarnated as a fish. And so the first one, does anyone know when the first incarnation of Krishna came? In what pastime did the first fish incarnation come? Any thoughts? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with Hiranyakashipu's brother.
Kurma, I'm not sure, but Kurma.
Paraha?
Yes. So there was at the point when the Lord appeared as the fish incarnation to save the Vedas. And so by killing Hayagriva and saving the in the time that the earth fell into the ocean. Now, in this particular pastime here, what we see is that Krishna has come in this particular pastime as the Matsya avatar. And this is very interesting storyline on how this all played out. So we'll just get a little background and how we can understand this and why Krishna came in this form. So this is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's a very interesting story. So as we can see here, this king, Satyavrata. What happened is that Satyavrata, he ended up, so I'm just going to go back here because I'm going to read this actually. So Satyavrata was a king that lived a long, long time ago. Okay. And he was engaged in the austerity of subsisting only by drinking water. And while he was performing this austerity on the banks of a river called the Kritamala River, does anyone know where the Kritamala River is? Has anyone ever been there? No, I'm not sure either. I certainly had never been. So he was offering oblations of water in the palm of his hand. And in the water, so he's offering oblations of water. So we see this, he's offering this. And in his hand, what did he find? A little fish. And so the fish appealed to the king for protection. So normally we see, at this point, Satyavrata doesn't know that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And normally we see that actually Krishna appears in this material world for two reasons. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. The two main reasons that Krishna appears in this world is to, we all know, most of us, right? To protect the devotees and annihilate the miscreants or punish the demons. Okay. But in this situation, as Krishna is coming in this form of a fish, he is actually asking for the protection of his devotee. We can see this. Krishna likes to do all different types of pastimes and get all different types of rasas from different devotees and so many different pastimes, like the pastimes with Mother Yashoda, where, he's scared of her and, looking for protection from his mother and these types of things. So here we have Satyavrata, this king. He's got the fish in his hand and the fish is asking for protection. And in those days, when a king is asked for protection, he has to grant this to any living entity. In our modern ways of thinking, mostly we consider that the only species that really need protection or that are worthy of protection, for the most part, are human beings. So we're very focused on how we can protect human beings and how we can create rights and ways to protect. But actually, from the Vedas and from the Srimad Bhagavatam and the teachings of Krishna, we understand that all living entities have the right to be protected. From the animals to the trees to the plants. And the kings at this time, they understood that. Unlike our current kings or leadership who allow for the wholesale slaughter of so many different living entities based on the false premise that human beings are the only real species that deserves real protection, which is a wrong way of thinking. So, as we understand from the Vedas. So this is something interesting to consider, that we frequently forget that fact, and it's something to try to pull forward in our mind and our consciousness, that we also want to try to support and protect all living entities, not just human beings. So the fish, or the king, understood this. So here he has this fish in his hand. Now, what happens is the fish says, he appealed to the king, and he said, please, put me in a safe place. I can't go back in that water because there's so many fish in there. The fish are going to eat me. And so he didn't know. He said, okay, I will give you shelter. And he puts them in a water jug, a little water jug. And so the fish, he wants to show, so he's in the jug, and he wants to show his potency to this king as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he starts growing. And he's too big for the water jug. So he expands his body. And so he says, okay, so he takes him and he puts him in a well. And as he puts him in the well, it says that he grows to 3 cubits in length. So I've never really heard of a cubit, and I had to look it up. Cubits, they say that cubit comes from ancient Egypt, which they don't, people come up with these things, they just make stuff up. But we can understand that this Srimad Bhagavatam, ultimately a cubit, is supposed to be about 18 inches, or from the length of the wrist to the elbow is a cubit. And so we're thinking the fish grows in the well to about 3 cubits. Then he's too big for the well, so he says, get me out of here. So he says, all right, well, let me take you and put you in a lake. But then he grows so big that he can't even fit in the lake. Now, the question that comes to my mind in this is he moves him from the lake, and then he puts him in the sea. But now he gets so big, I'm wondering how he moved him. How did he actually move the fish from the lake to the sea? I mean, they didn't have like cranes or tractor trailers or something. Somehow he was able to, through mystic power or something, move this giant fish from the lake to the sea. Now, at this point, the king starts to get a clue that there's something very special about this fish, and starts to realize that the fish is actually none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he expresses, but because even when he puts him in the ocean, he says, you can't put me in the ocean because even though I'm so big, there's many sharks in the ocean, and the sharks can also eat me. So what can I do? At that point is when this king that is being discussed here, Satyavrata, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he questions. So Satyavrata questions the fish and says, look, there's something wrong here. Like you can't just be regular fish. He says, okay, I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He said, oh, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand. So let me understand why and what is it that you came here for. So what the king then, or what the fish then describes to the king, is that, look, you got big trouble coming, buddy. We got big problems that are coming down the pike, not just for you, but for everybody in this planetary system, because guess what? There's a devastation on the way. And the devastation that's on the way is a big flood. And what you need to do is prepare for this flood. And what's interesting about this, and there's been correlations drawn in multiple articles from ISKCON and other writers and people who understand this pastime in Vedic scripture, is that there's another scripture that is very popular in the world that describes a flood that took place. And that would be, for those of us who grew up in the Western culture, most of us have some understanding of this. Anyone know what's the other big flood?
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark, right? And actually what's interesting is that this storyline is very similar, because here what is described is that what the fish avatar tells to Satyavrata is, look, you need to get a boat and that this water is going to inundate the entire universe. But I will, the fish incarnation is saying it, but I will come and protect you. But you need to get a boat. You need to get the other rishis, the other people, you know, the herbs and the seeds and other living entities, and you need to get them on the boat. And you can attach this boat to my horn. Now, I don't also, so we have this fish has a horn. So it's interesting because I don't really see fish with horns either. This is of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead can do anything and manifest himself into any form that he likes. But he specifically manifested himself in this form with a horn, gigantic fish, which it's described. I'll tell you how long this fish is described as, and it's very crazy, the length in a minute. But so he says, all right, get the people on the boat. He get everything together, get the people on the boat. The inundation of water is coming. And when it comes, I'll come back. You can attach the boat to my horn, and everyone who's on this thing is going to be good. Now, so of course, in due course of time, not too long from there, the annihilation takes place. What is the annihilation? This is at the end of the day of Brahma. So there's, from the Vedic understanding of time and from what we understand as time, it's very inconceivable for our small minds to consider the lengths of time that the demigods like Lord Brahma live. So I won't get into the exact numbers of it, but just to kind of get a broad sense of it, like you have 14 manus, okay, in a day of Brahma. And inside of that, at every single, so there's a cycle of kalpas that's happening within each manu. And there's a devastation that's happening on, and so the entire universe is being annihilated. And the whole cycle of kalpas in millions and billions of years from our perspective is happening every single day that Lord Brahma is alive, and every single night. And Lord Brahma lives for 100 years in his time frame, as most living entities are supposed to live actually for 100 years in their own recollection or their kind of own experience of time. So what's happening here is there's this huge, vast time frame that's happening. But in this particular situation, Krishna is coming in this form as the fish, as the water is rising and the annihilation is happening, and he's protecting the devotees, and he's giving them this boat. Okay, so this is where we're at here. We have this fish incarnation, and as it says in this verse, this fish incarnation is the shelter of all kinds of living entities. All right, now, what happens, so as this plays out, they're on the boat, they're offering prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as they're on the boat, and they're recognizing that, and they're meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're getting some understanding around what they should be doing and how they can be attaining spiritual enlightenment while they're on this boat. And that's coming to them from the core of their heart. And from this, actually, King Satyavrata takes his next birth as Vaivasvatu Manu. And Vaivasvatu Manu is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. And does anyone remember who Vaivasvatu Manu is in the Bhagavad Gita? So the sun god spoke the science of the Bhagavad Gita to his son, Manu. And the son of Vivashvata, so because of being the son of Vivashvan, this Manu is known as Vaivasvata Manu. So essentially, this is the historical understanding of actually the Bhagavad Gita that we are studying and that we are learning from. And this is happening millions of years ago, that this Satyavrata, who had the fish, got the boat, kind of like Noah from the Noah's Ark story, got the boat, realized more spiritual understanding, and then took his next birth as Vivashvan, and was spoken, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to him, and ultimately has come down through the chain of disciplic succession had been broken from him, but from Krishna to Arjuna, the Bhagavad Gita was picked back up. The speaking of the Bhagavad Gita and the understanding of the Bhagavad Gita was given back to humanity. And since then, disciplic succession of understanding that spiritual knowledge has come down through the line of teachers to us through Srila Prabhupada. It's very interesting. We understand that in the way spiritual knowledge is delivered is from teacher, spiritual master, or guru to disciple. And if that line gets broken, then actually the pure knowledge as it is gets lost. And when we don't have the pure knowledge, or it gets adulterated or tainted with other ideas or concepts, which is very easy to happen because there's so much speculation in the world and so many false gurus, that we can easily be misled. And this is why Srila Prabhupada has stressed over and over and over again that for us to understand spiritual knowledge, we need to follow the direction and be very attached to the teachings of a bona fide spiritual teacher. Because as we can see, if we were to come in contact with just even a verse like this, there is practically no possibility that without direction or guidance, we can make sense of what's going on here. So it is absolutely essential that we stay very tethered to the teachings of spiritually realized teachers, and from our perspective and from our understanding and from the reality of what Srila Prabhupada brought us, we have the ability to stay very tethered to Srila Prabhupada's teachings and avoid being misled or deviated by those who either willingly or unwillingly take us off in another direction. And just like if you're on an airplane, they have very specific targeted courses and pathways to get from, let's say, New York to Los Angeles. And in that very targeted pathway, if they're off by just 1 degree, in the beginning, it doesn't seem very far. But once you get from point A to point B, that 1 degree or 2 degree difference is going to take you to a completely different destination. So we can find that sometimes we think like, oh, well, maybe there's a tendency to want to try to go outside of what we know to be the factual basis of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, or the Srimad Bhagavatam that's delivered by Srila Prabhupada, and the guidance and the teaching that he gave us on how to live and how to understand this, and to try to kind of forge our own way, or to speculate ideas and speculate different approaches and pathways to get to the same goal. So there's a tendency to want to do that. Although in the beginning, and it can be very innocent, but what we understand is it's very easy to go off course. Even we can look and see in the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the six Goswamis and the devotees who came, they're clearly like they are extremely highly advanced, completely transcendental personalities. And they were preaching and giving the direct message of love of Godhead. It's like at the epicenter of the nuclear bomb of love of Godhead. They're like the core of it. And it didn't take very long, within 100 or 200 years in that area, that because of deviations, there were so many Sahajiya groups, or there were so many different offshoots from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that were doing so many crazy things in the name of the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so much so that really it came to a point that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is the father of the guru of Srila Prabhupada and also an acharya in our line as well, had to like kind of completely go against the whole society at the time in relation to Vaishnavism and the way people related to it, to bring it back into the direction of what the pure teaching is. And to do that, he really had to go against the status quo. And so did Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who was the guru of is the guru of Srila Prabhupada. And he was also he was bringing the direct message back to what it truly was. And because it had been deviated through small changes, which led to big changes, which led to a complete covering over of the actual teaching, and thousands of people were being misled by false gurus. So what the mercy, or you could say, which this is an understatement, but the value is there's so much value. There's an infinite amount of value that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually brought to us. But one aspect of their value is that they brought the teaching back into the pure message. And our Srila Prabhupada, who brought the teaching under the direction of his guru to the West, to America, and to the rest of the world outside of India, was on the order of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, his guru, delivering the message as it is, as we understand the Bhagavad Gita as it is. What does that mean? As it is, not with speculation, not with anyone's false ideas around what it could be or should be, but actually what it is. So what we have been able to have the great fortune of getting access to through the message of Srila Prabhupada is the actual teaching of Krishna as it is, that ultimately was spoken millions of years ago and is an eternal message, but sometimes gets lost through the broken disciplic succession. And what we're hearing about here in this verse is this Satyavrata, who was the previous incarnation of Vivishvan, who was spoken the Bhagavad Gita millions of years ago. So the one point that I want to just make sure that we can take away from this and understand is that if we can be very simple-minded in our approach to Krishna consciousness and really stay very connected to the message from Srila Prabhupada, how he did things, how he gave us the direction, then we can have a much better chance. We can actually be positioned to gain the mercy and come out of this cycle of suffering that we're finding ourselves over and over and over again in the material world. So what's interesting about this pastime as well, in terms of when Satyavrata ended up in the boat, and when they were in the boat, there was they were meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there was rishis there, and they were, and some from the Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes the actual kind of realizations that came to them while they were on the boat. And I want to just share what those realizations were, because I think it's important for us, and it really gives us a practical takeaway from this pastime, because it's, we could read this and say, wow, this is like really far out. You got to fish. Oh, by the way, how big, does anyone want to take a guess how big the fish, this Matsya avatar, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was that came to, that they hooked the boat to, the horn that they hooked the boat to? Anyone have any guesses on how big that fish was? Let's just say in feet or in miles, or however big you want to try to think it is. Anyone have any ideas how big that fish, how big Krishna was in that fish avatar? No thoughts? All right, I'll tell you. 8 million miles long. The fish avatar that came as the water was it says that he was 8 million miles long. How can that be? I don't know, but that's what it says. So as they're hooked to him, as the king is hooked to him, they're on the boat. This is the realizations that they came to. Following the instructions formerly given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the king anchored the boat to the fish's horn, and he used the serpent Vasuki as a rope. And thus, being satisfied, he began to offer prayers to the Lord. The king said, "By the grace of the Lord, those who have lost their self-knowledge since time immemorial, and who, because of ignorance, are involved in a material, conditional life full of miseries, obtain the chance to meet the Lord's devotees. I accept that Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme spiritual master. In hopes of becoming happy in this material world, the foolish, conditioned soul performs fruitive activities that result only in suffering. But by rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one becomes free from such false desires for happiness. May my Supreme Spiritual Master cut the knot of false desires from the core of my heart." And last one who wants to be free of material entanglement should take to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give up the contamination of ignorance involving pious and impious activities. Thus, one regains his original identity, just as a block of gold or silver sheds all dirt and becomes purified when treated with fire. May that inexhaustible Supreme Personality of Godhead become our spiritual master, for he is the original spiritual master of all other spiritual masters. So here we have it, these 3 prayers that the king is saying. What is he saying? He's saying that those who have lost their self-knowledge, their self-knowledge, and how do they lose it? Because they are involved in material conditional life. And they are thinking that the fruitive activities that they are performing are going to bring them happiness. This is called moha. This is called illusion. And it is the affliction that we are all up against in this material world. And as we can see that from these prayers, that actually the way out of this is by rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How? Because then one becomes free from such false desires for happiness. We are always desiring for happiness in this material world. Why is that? Because at our core, we are Sat Chit Ananda. We are eternally full of bliss, knowledge, and eternal, but we are stuck in these physical bodies. So because of this illusion, we are seeking after this happiness. And before we can get to the devotional service, what do we need to have? We need to have a chance to meet the Lord's devotees. This is the ticket in. Through the Lord's devotees, we can come in contact with transcendental knowledge, which in turn will open up our eyes and our understanding of the ultimate purpose of life, which is devotional service, which will free us from this false attempt at happiness. Because the happiness that we think we're getting in this material world is described as a shadow or a drop of water in the ocean, in the desert. Like this, like you're dying of thirst in the desert. And you take one drop of water and you're just like, that's all you get, but it's just like just that one drop is just giving you some relief. So it's described that our happiness that we experience and realize in the material world is like that, but somehow, because of our ignorance and our contamination, we continue to go after that happiness. So the process to come out of this is to come in contact with the Lord's devotees, which for those of us who are listening to this, whenever we're listening to this, watching this here right now, we are coming in contact with the Lord's devotees. Not through myself. I am a low-class rascal who has been given the ability to share Srila Prabhupada's message, but we are coming in contact with the pure devotee of Srila Prabhupada through his books. And he is giving us our entryway in to freedom from our illusion, and then an opening up for us to actually find real happiness. And he's like, Srila Prabhupada is kind of like our Satyavrata. He's given us the boat. He's got us on the boat, right? And so he's saying, here's the prayers. And these prayers allow for us to understand how we make it out. Once we get in contact with devotees, then we can perform devotional service. From devotional service, we can break free from the contamination. And then what happens, as it's described in this, we become like gold or silver that sheds all the dirt and becomes purified when it goes through the fire. So what's happening in devotional service and the process of true spiritual awakening is that we are being the fire of the sadhana, of the practice that we are undertaking, is purifying us. And this is a gradual process. It does take time. It doesn't have to take time, but generally it takes time for us to shed away all of these contaminations. But as it does, just like in the fire, gold and silver become pure, then we also become pure. So our ultimate goal here is to, first, we've all come in contact with a devotee. So here we are. Now the next stage is to practice devotional service, sadhana, and of course, the mercy that we have in this age of Kali Yuga and through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're doing this in japa every day. We're also doing this Sankirtan, Harinam. This is the single method for decontaminating ourselves. And from there, everything else will open up inside of our hearts. So this is what I have for today. Any questions or thoughts around this verse? I can tell you that if it's very technical in relation to manus and time frames, I'm really not going to be able to answer it very well, but I'll do my best. But anything that anyone has, any thoughts on this, or any corrections or ideas on anything that I mentioned, please we can say them now. And I'll just read a bit from the purport here of this verse where the prayer is spoken from Srila Prabhupada. And if no one has anything else to say, I'll end it after these couple paragraphs. But this is very nice. So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. In human life, one is meant to undergo austerity to purify one's existence. Tapo divyam putraka jina sattvam sudhayet. Tapo divyam. Because of contamination by the modes of material nature, one continues in the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, the purpose of human life is to purify oneself of this contamination so that one can regain his spiritual form and not undergo this cycle of birth and death. The recommended process of decontamination is devotional service to the Lord. There are various processes for self-realization, such as karma, jnana, and yoga, but none of them is equal to the process of devotional service. As gold and silver can be freed from all dirty contamination by being put into a fire, but not merely by being washed, the living entity can be awakened to his own identity by performing devotional service, but not by karma, jnana, or yoga. Cultivation of speculative knowledge or practice of yogic gymnastics will not be helpful. This, I think we can really understand this, okay? And I'm not throwing shade on anything that's happening. We have many attempts to try to bring people into Krishna consciousness, and many of them are very helpful. But we can understand, as Srila Prabhupada says here, cultivation of speculative knowledge or practice of yogic gymnastics will not be helpful. And it is a very slippery slope when we are presenting yogic gymnastics as a way to draw people in. And we must also be very aware that at the same time, these yogic gymnastics will not be helpful in producing spiritual realization unless the transition to devotional service is made. So this is a very important point, because it's very fashionable nowadays to present yogic gymnastics in the West as some kind of form of quasi-spirituality and as a way to draw people into Krishna consciousness. And there is value to it because it has drawn people in. But at the same time, we should also be very aware and cautious and not be very, deceptive to people around this. If they think they're coming in to get spiritual realization through gymnastics, but actually we're telling them that it has no value. Because at some point that has to be told, because it's Srila Prabhupada is saying it. So just here's the last paragraph. I'll read this and we'll go. The word varnam refers to the luster of one's original identity. The original luster of gold or silver is brilliance. Similarly, the original luster of the living being who is part of the Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. The Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha is the luster of Ananda or pleasure. So the luster of Ananda or pleasure. Ananda Mayo Bhayasat. Every living entity has the right to become Ananda Maya, joyful, because he is part of the Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. Krishna, that's Krishna. Why should the living being be put into tribulation because of dirty contamination by the material modes of nature? The living entity should become purified and regain his svarup, or his original identity. Thus, he can do only by he can do only by devotional service. I'll say that again. This he can do only by devotional service. Therefore, one should adopt the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is described here as Guru, the spiritual master of all other spiritual masters. So that's what I have for today. I appreciate everyone's time. if there's any other thoughts, we can say them now or forever hold your peace.
Hare Krishna, Shashi Shekhar Prabhu. Thank you for nice presentation. I liked your initial point. I was reflecting on it about Krishna consciousness being simple and keeping it simple. And I was just kind of a realization and a reflection that I've been having on this is that we hear about the glories of devotional service, and as you were saying, it purifies the heart and purifies the material desires, just as the impurities, of metal in contact, they can basically come out when it comes in contact with something that's pure. And oftentimes, I think as aspiring devotees, as we're in the process, our expectation is that this is going to happen faster than it sometimes actually does happen, because we still have some material desires. Our attraction to Maya, our attraction to the illusory energy of Krishna is still very strong. But yet we want the material desires to vanquish very quickly. And as a result, we become impatient. And due to that impatience of, okay, this isn't happening fast enough, we start to doubt the actual process of Krishna consciousness. Instead of actually doubting ourselves and that we're actually the cause of the slowdown based on our material desires, it's, sometimes the process is doubted. And that's where like the speculation starts coming in. Well, maybe chanting Hare Krishna isn't completely pure. Maybe we have to add a little of this to it to make it really work. Or maybe we have to add some, whether it's through jnana or through karma, we have to kind of add these other elements into it because it's not working the way it is. And then sometimes these elements are added and it makes us feel better, because now we're feeling like, okay, well, now we got the balance between the material and the spiritual, and it's like coming together. And that's kind of like where I see the elements of speculation when they kind of merge with bhakti, is because of the a lot of times we feel it's just impatience that we're not letting the process take place, and it's not happening fast enough in our lives because we're just we're still attached to our material desires. Anyway, it's just kind of a reflection that I had there, of how they all kind of come together and how we get away from allowing the main thing to remain the main thing and adding all these other kind of speculative elements into devotional life.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, as Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness is simple for the simple and complicated for the complicated. And it's, as you mentioned, like, we are impatient by nature, and we think, oh, we should be getting something sooner, and we want to blame it on the process or our lack of faith and our weakness in terms of our inability to overcome the desires that we have internally. Kind of puts us in this position to be like questioning everything. And a lot of it seems like it's driven by the desires, as you mentioned. Like, we have these desires and we want to actually try to fulfill them because we think that it's going to, make us happy. It's like we have an itch to scratch. We just want to itch it so bad. There was a devotee I heard, he was I forget his name, but he was one of the original Prabhupada disciples, and he had a lot of association with Prabhupada. He was a brahmachari, like from early on in the 60s. He's still active today. He's a sannyasi. I met him in Atlanta. He was there. He gave us a little talk one night, and he said Prabhupada used to say to us, don't be weak. Be strong. Don't be weak. He said, just don't be weak. Like, and what he meant by that, like what his take was, like, in your mind, like, don't give in. No one has a gun to your head. Like, don't give in. So just, and like, so that's what kind of comes to me, and what you're saying, Dronacharya Prabhu, is like, we have these desires and we give into them, or we want to give into them. So we come up with a speculation in terms of why it's not working. And it gives us all these justifications to do what we really want to do. But ultimately it just sets us back. And so if we can somehow develop strength, willpower to overcome it, it's like, it's really a necessary component. Maybe not necessary, but it's certainly helpful. I mean, mercy is the ultimate, we could just get zapped with all the mercy and we don't need willpower, but like, and we just feel the love of God and we just have it all. But most of us, myself for sure, I think developing willpower is very practical, and positioning ourselves in a place where we can have that willpower, making the right choices, being in the mode of goodness, that type of stuff. We keep moving in that direction. So anyways, thank you, Dronacharya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Along the line of patience, that is actually one of the elements that, it's interesting. It's one of the 6 items listed by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction as principles that are favorable to devotional service. Like, in order, like, if patience is the ones that one of the 6 that are listed, puts a high priority on that principle, and we can see how it can apply. That we remain faithful, as you said. What did the devotee say? Remain strong.
Yeah, he said Prabhupada used to tell. He said Prabhupada used to tell us, be strong, don't be weak.
Yeah. Because the other, so 2 more principles of the 6, there's is enthusiasm, remaining enthusiastic, and then also being confident. Remaining confident that the process is pure and it works, and at the end it will, if you follow the process, the result will be there. That was good. I thank you for your class. Just trying to connect the dots there as to how this kind of applies in my life, and I see kind of unfolding in devotees' lives, and how this patience, confidence, enthusiasm, being strong, as you said, and not, overcoming the desires that we have, and remaining diligent on the path in our service to Krishna. It's tough. It's not easy.
I mean, I think about when Srila Prabhupada, imagine what it was like for him. He's gave up his family, like at the point in time when he left and took sannyas, and he had like really no support. He was wandering for like, I think it was like 8 years practically, like after he left his family. And he had no real support, no real assurance that he was going to do anything great in the world. He had a family and a business that he had attempted to and he just had to, like, he walked away from all of it. I can just imagine, like, it seems like, oh, okay, yeah, people walk away from their families all the time, but it's not like, it's so much deeper than that. Like what he actually had to, the difficulties that Srila Prabhupada had to undergo to get to where the process, to where he ended up. Not to say that he wasn't always a pure devotee, but like, I'm just saying, I think about that and I'm like, wow, the austerity Srila Prabhupada went through and the faith that he must have had to stick it through, and the strength. I mean, it's just like the internal willpower and strength is just, yeah. trying to get there. Get somewhere close, an atom, a piece of dust at the feet of the capacity of Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa Trupyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Any announcements, Prabhu?
No announcements.
Okay.
Right now. Jen, Hare Krishna, and be happy.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you very much.
You.